Unexpected Elements is the podcast shining a light on the science lurking behind the news.
We know lots of scientists and we're not afraid to call them up.
Unexpected Elements from the BBC World Service. Find it wherever you get your BBC podcasts.
Hello, I'm James Reynolds. Welcome to The Documentary from the BBC World Service. In OS Conversations, we bring together people from around the world to share their experiences, and this time it's conversations on climate change in Africa. Africa releases only a small proportion of the world's greenhouse gases, but research suggests that parts of the continent are already experiencing some of the very worst effects of climate change. In recent days, leaders have been discussing how to respond. We cross the continent to hear from farmers, journalists, and climate activists.
Young people, even in the technological age, don't know what climate change is. They spend their time on the internet, mostly on Facebook.
Yeah,
on
not
Twitter,
looking at climate change. I mean, looking at other things, yeah.
We'll hear later from people from Liberia, Nigeria, Gambia, Ghana, Malawi, and Kenya. Indeed, the Kenyan capital, Nairobi, is the main focus because in recent days it hosted Africa's first ever climate summit. More than a dozen African leaders got together to consider the continent's response to the changing environment, but also to build their case ahead of the next big climate conference, COP28. That'll be held in Dubai at the end of the year. A recent United Nations report warned that the rising demand for water, combined with limited and unpredictable supplies, threatened to aggravate conflict and displacement, affecting millions of people across the continent. So, for our first conversation, let me introduce you to three farmers who use some of that water to grow food for their families and local communities. Mary Afan is from Nigeria, Evelyn Okoth is from Kenya, and Tiwonge Gondiwe is from Malawi. I began with Tiwonge, asking her to describe a typical day.
When I wake up at 4 a.m., it's when I go to the farm. I go with my children, all of them, the boy and the girl. We till our land using a hoe. I come back around 11. I do prepare my food. I do go and fetch water. I also do my farming activities until 5 or 6. When it is 5 or 6, I come back home. I also do my cooking, making sure that the children are taking their bath. But it comes to 4 a.m. again, I wake up. But I normally wake up at 2 when I have to plan to say, tomorrow, how will my day look like?
I have a kitchen garden for vegetables. I have my farm for maize, because that is my income from the vegetables. So when I wake up in the morning, I have to harvest a few that I may sell during the day. Then I go to my maize farm, where if it is during the weeding season, I take my time to weed myself plus my children. Then in the evening, I harvest vegetable again for the evening meals for the customers that are around me.
In Nigeria, the farming is a family farming. I will wake up by 4 o'clock to prepare the food we are going to take to the farm. We will stay in the farm working in my husband's farm from that 6 o'clock till 5 p.m. in the evening. We come back. After I finish preparing food, I will still have to prepare for tomorrow the food we are going to eat in the farm. My husband give me 1 day in a week to work on my own personal farm because in Nigeria, the community where I come from, land belongs to the male children. So my husband land, he can decide to give me small portion. Then he will give me 1 day in a week to go and work in my farm. When he sell the crop, he decides what happened with the money. But having worked on my own farm, if I sell it, that become my own personal income. It occurs to me the woman is actually the person that does almost about 85% of the work within the day.
We women, we are the food producers and we feed the nation. When there is hunger in the house, the children cry. If there is hunger in the country, it's like the men cry also to me to say there's no food. So a woman is someone who is centered at the agriculture work. But the benefit for the woman is very little, and she works a lot of her time with the unpaid care work.
We always say that we multitask. You prepare your house to be neat, and you also go to the garden to feed the household. And it's not only going to the garden. In the garden, you even do the seed selection there at the garden for your future planting. Because the selection of the seeds, normally we do at the garden, is where you choose the healthy ones that will grow and will give good yield.
And as you deal with the many jobs that you each have, the family responsibilities, the responsibilities on your farm, you, like other farmers in Africa, like other farmers in parts of the world, are having to deal with the effects of climate change. What are those effects where you farm in Malawi, Tiwonge?
We have been hit hard by the climate change. We are no longer receiving the rains as we were receiving in the past. But at the same time, we are being affected by the cyclones, the dry spells, the floods. We couldn't believe that my house or our house or neighbor's house could be washed away. We couldn't believe that the little food which was in the house could be washed away. We couldn't believe that the animals which we tamed for our livestock, for business, to say that if I sell this animal, I will pay school fees for my children. You could find that the animals are going. You couldn't believe that you could see our children, our neighbors dying. The whole of the house, people dying due to the cyclones. So it affects us more.
It has become a crisis. It has led to poor harvest on our farms due to unpredictable rains. There are some water bodies that are disappearing due to the climate changes. Soil erosion is very high because the rains are unpredictable. And even knowing when to plant, you may not know. You may plant this week, next week it is drought, it is sun. So it is a very big pity, it is a very big battle that the climate change has showed the farmers here in Kenya.
We in Nigeria, the effect have become so much that a lot of farmers have lost their livelihood. When the rain don't come or they come late, you lose your investment. What you are left with is to start all over again. A lot of people, even farmers, cannot even afford to feed their families because their farms were washed away by flood. And again, just like my sister said, something we cannot control is about the weather. We don't know when the rains are coming. Sometimes they come early, sometimes they come late.
We depend upon those weather predictors. So sometimes they can say, oh, this year the rain is coming. You could find out that as a woman farmer, you prepare yourself very early and the rain comes late. Sometimes it can be opposite. They predict that the rain will come late while the rain will come earlier. So it has negative impact on us.
Sometimes in Nigeria, when they predict the rain is starting early, it happens. Flood is coming, it happens. But the major problem is the information, we don't have it at the community level. You will have them talk either in newspaper, radio, television, but there is no attempt to go to the grassroots, to our rural community where the whole impact is, to pass those information in our local languages so that farmers will understand either through the traditional rulers or doing training within the community to tell us that this is what is going to happen. And sometimes before we hear about this, the rains have gotten to finish.
Three extremely hard-working farmers there who are having to contend with the increasing unpredictability of nature. Maria Fan from Nigeria, Evelyn Okoth from Kenya, and Tiwonge Gondiwe from Malawi. And they were speaking to me from the BBC's studios in Nairobi. You're listening to OS Conversations on climate change in Africa from the BBC World Service with me, James Reynolds. The main outcome from the summit was the Nairobi Declaration, a proposal for a global system of carbon taxes designed so that the world's major polluters commit more resources to poorer nations and help finance climate-related projects. There were also investment pledges at the summit totaling several $billions from countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Germany. And one of the criticisms you hear about these kind of gatherings of leaders, presidents, prime ministers and all their advisors is that talk and promise don't always lead to action or impact. So let's hear now from some activists who campaign on climate change. They're all involved in local projects to spread the word about the effects of global warming and to improve the lives of the African communities they work with. Ezekiel Nyanfor is in the Liberian capital, Monrovia. He runs the Liberian Youth for Climate Action. And Patricia Beko is a climate activist with 350 Ghana, based in Accra. Firstly, though, you'll hear from Vincent Muhoro from Nanyuki in Kenya. He works for Dunia Bora, which means a better world. It's a social enterprise that produces plant-based leather from cactus.
My climate activism started in the year 2019. I was doing research on the internet and I came across the word climate change. I didn't know what that word meant at the time because I was not taught about climate change in school, both primary and secondary school. I became more curious because I saw that it affects every sector of our life, our health sector, economy, the environment. So I decided to solve that problem. So I called a few of my colleagues. They never knew what climate change was also, so I decided to educate them about it.
They never knew?
After that, we all never knew what climate change was at the time.
I started while I was in school in 2011. I was a project presenter for Enactus in my university. Enactus was then SAIF, Student in Free Enterprise. And what we did was to look at a problem in the community and then solve that problem. But then in solving it, we look at the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit. Through that, I met a friend who then introduced me to my current organization. Even at that time in the university, as a graduate, I didn't know what climate change is and how much more the people at the grassroots, like the farmers, the fisher folks. And so we decided to educate them for them to understand what climate change is.
Take us through your day-to-day job. What does that involve?
Currently, in 2013, when our then government decided to put up a coal-fired plant, and we came together as CSOs to campaign against it. So after a long fight in 2017, the government then said, okay, fine, we are not going coal. And so we asked ourselves, okay, these communities are asking because they were told that this coal was going to bring them employment and progress in their communities. So what then do we do? And so we started the Renewable Energy for Communities campaign. We have renewable energy for schools and renewable energy for women. And so with the schools, what we do is sensitize and educate the students on what climate change is and how they, as young people, are contributing to the climate change issue and how they can turn the table around and mitigate it.
Are the young people that you speak to, are they interested?
Yes, they are. It's interesting because when you go to schools and young people, even in the technological age, don't know what climate change is. They spend their time on the internet, mostly on Facebook,
on not
Twitter,
looking at climate change. I mean, looking at other things,
Yes, but once we go and speak with them, we ignite the spirit of a lot of them who become, some of them sign up to become members of the organization.
And Ezekiel, do you find that with young people that they might not want to look at climate change? They want to look at videos or anything else?
What Patricia is saying is important because the conversation on climate change is scientific. And many people don't understand the science beyond climate change. They're not interested in the sciences. So we have to communicate the message of climate change at the level that they can understand that it is not about only the science, but it's about the real life situation, the flooding, the sea level rise.
I want to use a quote of my coordinator when we visited one school, and she just asked the students, when there's a disaster, do you think your parents will grab you whilst they are running for their lives? And so it is about you.
How do they respond when you say that?
They agreed. Okay, so it was part were agreeing, others were saying, I trust my mother will carry me along. And then we asked again, look at you, Even though you are young, you might be stronger than your mother. And you think your mother will carry you along whilst she's running. And so it's a big issue. And what we do to ignite them is how we ask them these kind of questions and allow them to answer it themselves. We don't want to use big words or jargons or the scientific words that Ezekiel is talking about. So what we do is rather make it like a fun fair. So we ask them, what do you understand by climate change? What do you know about renewable energy? Just put it through art, how you understand it. So you see some of them put how they understand through music, through poems, through paintings. We get to ignite their spirits.
We've naturally gravitated, the three of us, towards talking about young people. But I would imagine any discussions about climate change have to include everybody, including older people, who, of course, have an equal stake in the world. They have families of their own. Patricia, how do you engage with older people on climate change?
So what we do is when we go to the communities, even though we have teamed it women in renewable energy, we still involve the men in the community because we need to consult with the chief, the custodian of the land, and his elders, who are mostly men, and they help us to mobilize the community members in order for us to educate them. So we still educate them on the climate issues and how they are contributing as a community and what they can do to also mitigate that. We still let our solar experts train them on how they can use waste materials such as the e-waste and the plastic materials to do their own solar bulbs as well in the community.
How do they respond to that?
They are always eager and happy. When it comes to the training aspect, you see everybody up on their feet, wanted to learn how to do these things. And there are some communities that have, when it comes to plastic waste, it's like it's swallowing them. It is important that we get the community and the people in the community to understand that climate change is real.
Climate activists Patricia, Ezekiel and Vincent. And we wanted to pick up on Patricia's point at the end of the conversation there about communicating climate change. So we brought together two people whose job it is to do precisely that. Naima Silla is editor and environment journalist for Gambia's Voice newspaper, and Rosalia Omungo is an award-winning environmental journalist based in Nairobi. How did they get involved in reporting on the topic?
I liked the fact that we were able to see the human side. It involved a lot of interacting with not only the environment, but the people that live in the environment. I felt that there was impact in the stories that I was doing. So I found my niche and I ran with it.
Well, it's my passion because this is a global crisis and Gambia is not an exception. So I see that it's more related to human interest stories. So because of this, I became so passionate to pursue writing environmental stories so people will, get to know more about environmental issues, and then, people's voice will be heard out there.
You're both journalists and so am I. We all have news meetings to attend. Sometimes those meetings are incredibly boring. Sometimes they're interesting. Sometimes they go on and on and on. Do people listen more or listen less when it comes to talking about the environment in a meeting?
Like here in Kenya, the population is very, very much sensitized on environment matters. Time and again, environment stories are becoming easier to sell. There is space for the environment. You just have to package your story.
How do you do that?
Doing the basics, just doing the basics of the 5 Ws and the H, and especially the so what, right? For environment stories, the so what matters a lot. And in fact, if you would begin with that. So the Nairobi Dam is undergoing rehabilitation. It's been affecting the residents in the area. Then when you begin to tell people what's in it for this investment, then it becomes a story because you will then be speaking about the residents and the monies that will be involved in cleaning it up or the revenue that will come from having a cleaner Nairobi Dam. So when you package your stories by bringing in the human face and by simplifying it, by giving us the implications, by putting numbers in the story, whether in terms of loss or gain, then a story begins to make sense not only to the editor, but also to the people that it affects, to the audiences.
For example, in the Gambia, when you talk about climate change or environmental issues, there are different aspects. The most concerned topic is sea level rise, air pollution, plastic pollution, etc. So when you bring out this topic, these are issues that directly impact the lives of people on a daily basis. People get to be very interested to know more about these issues and how it really affects their lives and how they're going to get solutions to these mitigating or adaptation measures. So these are ways to get their attention and bring in the human face by dealing with topics that directly impact their lives.
Rosalia, in Kenya, every job, no matter what it is, comes with its frustrations. What are the frustrations that you face?
One of the challenges was not knowing which is the next big story. Sometimes you see stories being told from your backyard by the international news, and you think, oh, that's my backyard and I should have known, The other challenge would be under-resourced newsrooms. If you know of a story in a far-flung area, it would need a little more resources for you to take a flight with a crew to go cover it if it's TV. And remember, the newsrooms are cutting down on costs, also on manpower itself. So the process of apportioning resources to cover the environment story tends to diminish. And that then is one of the challenges.
For my part here, some of the challenges that you come across when you're reporting on environmental issues, access to information, access to data per se, scientific data to make you enrich your research.
Rosalia, what do you learn from conversations with regular Kenyans about the environment?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Point number one is that Kenyans are so enlightened about the environment because there's been intentional coverage of the environment despite the few challenges of resources or manpower. So Kenyans are so much enlightened. And Kenyans are woke, Should we say that we always say stay woke? Kenyans are very, very much on guard and are very quick to get to social media. Social media has disrupted traditional media. And when Kenyans see something happening that's wrong, they will go to social media and make noise about it. That's one of the things that I have realized with Kenyans. They are very, very vigilant, especially about resources, about what the ruling class is doing based on what they should do, and are very quick to get to make their voices heard, especially on Twitter. We have a whole brigade called Kenyans on Twitter. Now, I guess we'll call them Kenyans on X. So they are very vigilant.
Environment journalists Rosalia in Kenya and Naima in Gambia. Our thanks to them and to all of our guests this week. I'm James Reynolds. You've been listening to The Documentary with conversations on climate change in Africa from the BBC World Service.